Salam and peace, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to My Voice's final episode of The Race Against Racism. I'm your host, Mariam Khan.
And I'm your co-host, Maria Mendes, and today we have two guests from the My Voice team.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean, the youth mentor for My Voice.
Podcaster, and I'm the head editor of My Voice.
Thank you guys for joining us today. So I wanted to start.
Thanks for having us.
So I wanted to start the conversation in a more open-ended way, and I want to ask you guys, what is some of the societal change that you guys have seen your communities going toward with everything going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the other different types of systematic change that are taking place right now?
Well, I've seen people recognizing, first off, that they need to change and their flaws and what they're doing that isn't right, that they shouldn't be doing, and that is racist or that is wrong for them to do. And I see them owning up to it and trying to change, which I think is a big step, and I'm glad that people are doing that. That's one of the main things that I've been seeing.
What about you guys?
Well, personally, yeah. So, sorry. Go ahead, Iman. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just saying I definitely have seen changes both on an international level and on a local level as well. A lot more of my friends were having more open conversations about social justice and the Black communities in our city and kind of what we can do to help those communities as well. So I'm really grateful that the Black Lives Matter movement has created so much more conversation for us to discuss these issues that do need to be talked about.
Yes, exactly. People aren't so afraid anymore.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I'm noticing this time around in this current movement, which might be a bit different than the one previously, or maybe it's because I'm just a little older now. But previously, I found that it was kind of looked upon as a fad, and people would kind of jump on the bandwagon and be social activists and keyboard warriors, and then kind of a few months later just completely forget about that entire issue. So I think what I'm seeing right now, or maybe what I'm hoping, and there's some indications to say that this is happening, that this is more of a long-term thing. It's more of a type of activism that's happening that's going to be long-lasting. So I feel it's not just something that's taking control with regards to people who are watching the news or people who are involved in current events. I think this is permeating the entire, basically, society on different levels, and especially in terms of pop culture. I think this current movement in America, the Black Lives Matter movement, this time around has permeated pop culture a lot more strongly than it had in the past, or at least that's what the impression is. So I think, fingers crossed, if the positive changes come, then they'll be long lasting.
Yeah, and I definitely think people are starting to be more self-aware, as well as having open discussions with people who maybe before they would have not had those discussions with, or maybe it was a subject that was not going to be brought up, but now people are really starting to see the importance in this. And then what you were mentioning about pop culture, I think a lot of people are also starting to hold others accountable for their actions against minorities, especially the Black community, which I think is super important, because in the past it wasn't that big of a deal if someone who's a celebrity or someone who has a platform would do something that was either racist or had underlying racism. But now it has become, I think, a much bigger deal, and that's really important for change to take place, where the people who have a platform and who have some power are held up to those standards, for sure. In terms of our platform with My Voice, what have, because I know both of you guys are from different parts of My Voice. Iman is part of the magazine, and Sean, you are in charge of the digital team. So what have you guys done to implement some of this change or bring awareness to it?
Well, on the magazine side of things, we have done some articles in the past on Black Lives Matter. We do have one from, I believe it's 2014, that we actually discussed why Black Lives Matter is a Muslim issue. And we've had other articles talking about colorism and white supremacy in Canada. Plus, in our upcoming issue, discussing kind of like the changes that are coming in 2020, we also touch upon the Black Lives Matter movement in the future. So it definitely is an issue that we've touched upon frequently, and I think that yes, go ahead. We should discuss it more, just because of how important of an issue it is, both in the general community and especially in Muslim communities as well.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, overall, my voice as an organization on the whole is always promoting racial unity and promoting tolerance for other races. Just because the whole basis of my voice is founded on uniting all the youth in Toronto, and doesn't matter your ethnic background, your economic background, or your race. And I think in terms of, aside from this series, of course, that we're doing right now, we've had quite a few. We were very active on social media, especially the past 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and we had quite a few different social media campaigns that were going on that kind of were tying into what was going on around the world at the time. So if you guys were following our social media, you would have seen that. And even in this series as well, in the previous episode, we've had a lot of different guests from the Black community, from the Muslim community, from even non-Muslim community and non-Black communities in the US as well. And that kind of gave us a chance to hear different perspectives from all the different sides, rather than kind of keep ourselves boxed into one narrative or one discourse.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest reasons why the movement did start, though, was due to police brutality. And out of the multiple things that the Black community goes through, police brutality is a huge thing. And I think that is one of the main reasons that all of this did thankfully start. So what do you think in terms of policing? And I know in Canada, since both of you are there, it's very different than how it is in the US in terms of trust in the police and the way the system works. But how would you guys see that? Is police reform needed? Is complete repeal of the police force needed? What do you guys think is a solution moving forward?
I think reform is definitely needed, especially in America. Sorry, that is where there is a most immediate response. But in Canada as well, we've had a history of not really projecting all parts of our history, such as in Toronto there was a recent shooting of Ijaz Chaudhry. He had schizophrenia, and the police were called, and they didn't deal with that call as they should have. So it's an issue in Canada as well, contrary to popular belief. And but in America, definitely, it's a huge issue in Black Lives Matter, and reform is definitely needed so that the first answer that people come to when dealing with emergencies like these is not violence, because violence isn't the answer to most questions. And honestly, we should be looking more at the more of the social aspects of the issues that require intervention. There have been plans discussing whether more social workers or nonviolent methods could be dispatched in order to deal with nonviolent situations. So I think that is a good step in the right direction when it comes to police reform.
Yes, I agree with you. I know that most people don't know this, but like the police, it originated from men who were trying to catch back the enslaved when slaves were brought to America. And so the police, the core is really just getting Black people and keeping them away from like the wider society, keeping them locked up because they are a threat. And so I think it needs to be changed. And in many other countries, we see that the police are able to just protect the people and have a good relationship with them, because they're not seeing them as a threat or as someone that's going to harm them, but as someone who needs help from them.
Yeah, I think that connection needs to be made in all communities where the Black community is just like everyone else. And all of these, even if they're not outright stereotypes or someone won't outrightly say something racist, they still have those underlying impressions that this person is not like me and I need to defend myself from this person, which are all so, so wrong. And I think is a big motive in a lot of these things. So, another question I had was, clearly in the United States, at least, the police are not seeming to get the message that protesters are trying to show and that people all over the country and all over the world have been trying to spread for the past month. So I think over the past long weekend, 5 Black children were killed, and while people were celebrating the independence of America, which again was very controversial this year because some people were like, what are we even celebrating? So, because clearly the police and the whole justice system is not getting the message, what do you think is the next step if protesting is clearly not working? And even then, people have their issues with the protesters by saying, oh, you can't loot, you can't do this, you can't do that, where there's so much attachment with these other insignificant things, whereas the real problem at hand is not being discussed. What do you think is the next step for people to take? Because protesting and even peacefully protesting is not working.
Yeah. I think people need to start spending Black and spending their money with communities that they know support them instead of giving money to these big corporations and companies that are against Black people, that don't like Black people, that are racist to the employees that are Black, or to people coming to the store that are Black. And just because America runs off money, and if we stop giving them all this money, they're going to realize that they need to treat people right so they can keep making their money and be happy and whatnot. And I know like yesterday was supposed to be like a blackout, and we were supposed to like only buy Black, and I think that's a great step. But I think we have to make it longer. It can't just be a one-day thing. It has to be for weeks, maybe even years. But we have to do it for change to come. As we saw with like the bus boycott, like they did it, and it took a long time, but they ended up getting what they needed.
Yeah.
I agree, definitely. Like, economic power is probably the greatest power there is in America and in the Western world in general. So once we have control of, funds and money and stuff, that's usually where, there's a saying, put your money where your mouth is. So, there's only so much we can say, only so much we can do. When, honestly, I think alongside with an economic change, there also needs to be a bit of like a moral reform. Like that pretty much is what the whole Black Lives Matter movement is. It's a social moral reform, but we really need to address what these misconceptions are that people, believe that police brutality is okay. The Black community, we shouldn't really care about these things when really we should care about these things. This isn't just a Black Lives Matter issue. It's a human issue, really. And we all need to learn how to have empathy for others. And I mean, if you can't have sympathy for children being killed over the July 4th weekend, I honestly, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I just want to add that, so like if you wanted to talk about moving forward and what are the next steps, I think there are two issues. One is the police brutality issue, and for that, I think that higher accountability is one of the key things that is needed for any sort of change to be had. Because right now, what we see is that police departments protect their own, and even if they're in the wrong and they're breaking the law, the system does not allow for them to get punished. So I think the first step would be to increase accountability. So it doesn't matter if they're being violent towards a white person or a Black person or a Mexican or anyone. If they break the law, they're going to get punished. I think that's very key. And secondly, Iman, what you said about rather than being, or in addition to it being an economic an option, we can use it's a social and moral issue. I think that's completely right. I was reading a report just a couple of days ago. It was about how there was a study done on a group of, I forgot which city it was, but they were doing a study and they were canvassing, going door to door and talking to people about issues. There was a particular issue in the area which most of the residents were completely against. And some would say it was like a bigoted stance that they had. I don't want to mention what issue it was just because, for sensitivities and all. But basically what the researchers found was that when they went canvassing door to door and spent only 10 minutes speaking to those residents about the issue, and asking them to put yourself in that minority shoes and try to understand how they feel, they found that 3 months later on, these same residents who they had that conversation with, they were a lot less likely to hold those same views, and their change in views actually stayed. It wasn't just like a week long or 2 week long feeling of empathy. It actually remained. So I think conversation and connecting the gap between where the groups in not only in the US but around the world who have issues with each other, I think connecting that gap through conversation and dialogue, as cliche as it sounds, is important.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think that kind of brings it back to our own community and our own households. What are we doing to inculcate that empathy and that morality? Because unfortunately, people, what they're seeing on the outside and what they're seeing through the media and stuff is clearly not what should be portrayed. And so, under the skin of it all, there is still that implication that this is the right thing, which it isn't. And so, I think that reform definitely needs to be there, and it has to be done very consciously, because unconsciously a lot of these other biases are being created. So how do you guys think is the right way to approach this kind of conversation in our own, whether it's the Muslim community, whether it's your own religious or ethnic community? What do you think is the right way to go about this? Because a lot of the time those are the places that are hardest to have these kinds of conversations, because the tradition, which is very sick, is just kind of has this deep rooted bias or implications of the Black community.
Yeah. I think one small thing, but one needed thing, is that when someone says something that's someone who's close to you, a family member or a friend, that's wrong, either whether it be a joke or a statement, you have to tell them that's wrong. So they know it's wrong, they can stop saying those things. Because if your own family is being rude and racist, then like you can't really go out to anybody else in the world if your own family's over here.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in Desi culture, most more specifically, because that's the culture I have the most experience with. There's a lot of importance placed on having respect to our elders, and unfortunately, it tends to be the older generation that holds these views against Black communities. And there's also a huge issue with colorism and a favoritism towards having lighter skin, because that's an outdated beauty norm. And I think that's where most people tend to get tripped up on, where they don't really want to confront their elders. But I think we need to realize, in order for the world to move on and for our families to move on, we need to be able to explain to our elders that Islamically, racism is wrong, and morally, racism is wrong. So even though it may have been the beliefs that people grew up with, we need to be able to accept change for the betterment of both ourselves and others.
Yeah, completely agree with everything you guys said, and I just want to add, as a Muslim, I find myself that I already, in addition, automatically, I come from a framework that promotes racial harmony and racial tolerance. And I think in terms of trying to bring this change within our own communities, in our Muslim communities and in South Asian communities, just because I'm from South Asia as well, so I'll speak about that. One way could be to use the older generation's own frameworks, how they view the world, and use those and try to explain to them the current situations through those. So one example could be using the Holy Quran and using Surah. For example, there's one Surah 30, Surah 30, Ayah 22, and it says, "And one of his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the diversity of your languages and colors. Surely in this are signs for those of sound knowledge." So if you have someone in your family, from the old generation who are kind of stuck in their views and not willing to understand the changing ground realities, try to speak to them in their own language and explain to them, look, this is what our religion says. This is what we have to believe in. So why are you having such outdated or, like Iman said, bigoted views? So I think that might get us somewhere, rather than kind of tell them that, oh, you guys are completely out of line, racist, and you have no idea what you're talking about. Because I feel like they'll put up a defensive wall then and can't really get much done.
Yeah. No, I really think that one of the biggest ways to move forward now is to, discuss these solutions and genuine tips that people can use so that we can move ahead and really put this behind us once and for all. Because, I mean, it's a constant struggle every time, this issue pops right back up. And I think people, a lot of the times, what Iman was saying earlier, separate this between, oh, this is a Black community issue, not really our thing. I mean, we don't want them to die, but like it's happening to them. It's this very insensitive, an apathetic way of looking at it. And so I think now that finally these discussions are happening, that we should really be strongly working towards solutions. So I'd really like to thank all of you guys for this very productive discussion. And I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in today and for all the previous episodes for joining us on the series of the Race Against Racism. If you want more updates of what's going on with My Voice for our coming series and events, please follow us at all our social medias at My Voice Canada, and we'll see you next time.